Hello, Karina.
Hello, Sue.
So, for those of you who don't know us, Karina and I are coaches, and on a Friday evening, we like to get together and chat about important stuff to do with personal development, self awareness, and life issues. Would you say, Karina?
Yep, all around bucket list.
So, what are we going to talk about tonight then? Did you have anything in mind you'd like to
I
talk
didn't have anything specific, but I thought it would be interesting to talk about communication in terms of what kinds of conversation we can have, and perhaps the effort it requires to get to a point of having the courage to have those types of conversations.
about?
Um, because I don't know about you, but we all play those scenarios over in our head, and
Mm,
we have scenes going on, and we have these films running about how we want it to go, and they don't necessarily always transpire in that ideal scenario that we practiced.
yeah.
Um, so I thought that might be something interesting to look at this evening.
Thank you. Yes, that sounds good. So, when might that scenario need to present itself? Is this, are we talking about challenging uh, conversations with people that we might find it difficult to talk with?
Yeah, I think we could put it in any segment, really, couldn't we? It could be work, it could be personal, it could be relationship, it could be parental, it could be children,
Yes,
it could be friendships.
yes,
Um, I mean, I think about how many times in my life that I refrained from um, having that kind of conversation, either from the decision that I'd made that it's in my mind wasn't worth it. It wasn't worth the energy investing into that, because I had no investment in that relationship as such,
yes,
um, or out of fear of not being able to have the type of conversation that I wanted to have, for, I guess, the fear of getting angry, not being able to articulate myself in the way that I truly desire to, um, or simply not trusting the other person enough to be able to hold that space for
yes.
me.
So, we're talking about difficult conversations that sometimes need to be had with people to honour something that's going on for us that needs to be spoken about, or say a truth that needs to be aired.
Mm.
And it's a potential difficult conversation because of the fantasies that we have around how that might be received, what it might bring up for us. Um, and you were saying that it could perhaps turn into anger, possibly. Um, could go
Fear of showing emotion during that conversation as well.
yeah,
That's a big one for a lot of people.
absolutely.
Absolutely huge for me, because um, I think my biggest fear is um, getting tearful, and I usually only do that when I'm really angry. So
Yes,
I don't want to get to that point in a conversation where I feel so emotionally riled up that I'm unable to express myself in the way that I know I'm capable of. Because communication to me is so vital. The words that I choose are so vital.
so
um, so I have that pressure on myself at the same time that I expect more from me than I do the other person, if that makes sense.
right, something about living up to a standard of yourself that you want to
Mm,
maintain. But also that is that showing of vulnerability. It
mm,
can kind of upend, can't it, what you're trying to kind of do, or what you're
mm,
trying to what you want to come across.
mm.
Um, so yeah, you can be upended by our own vulnerability in some way,
You
and
can,
and
but
it
I think it's important though to remember as well, in those cases where that might happen or that may have happened, if we remember what the other person gave back to us in those situations, um, and how that possibly opened up the conversation to something that had a far better outcome in the end, because we were vulnerable. We were able to be held by that other person in terms of that conversation. Is often, I think, perhaps the biggest surprise, and that's something that we don't factor into those scenarios that we play in our heads.
So sometimes we can be met in our vulnerability, and it can open up a whole other kind of channel of communication, and perhaps, I was going to say intimacy, but that's not necessarily the right word, but it can bring you closer in some ways, or at least the understanding there can be, or lack of understanding can be bridged. But also, what about the scenario when, I know many times I've wanted to speak my truth to somebody, and I have known quite, strongly, had a sense that I will not be met in my strength or in my vulnerability or in whatever, however it comes out. It's going to land on, on perhaps on deaf ears, especially in a work placement. And I think you mentioned the word investment earlier. How much are we invested in this person, or in whatever the scenario is, in the situation, that it's worth me showing up in my vulnerability potentially?
Absolutely. And I think it's important to have a strong sense of that investment. And I can remember so many scenarios in my professional career and in my personal life where I have known without a doubt that it is simply not worth investing that energy and that effort and that consideration sometimes as well towards the other person. Or the entire situation. And I remember times where it has been vital for me to speak up, speak my truth, communicate how I felt about what was going on, and not once have I regretted doing that in those scenarios, because it's about having a strong back and a soft front, like Brené says. And if we are able to do that from a place of compassion for ourselves and compassion for the other person as well, because they're not always expecting that conversation to happen, or they're not expecting the conversation to go down that particular road. So if we can have the ability ourselves to hold space for that other person at the same time, and be aware that they might find what we're saying not the easiest thing, or they weren't expecting it, therefore they're thinking and feeling on their feet as well. Having a slightly bigger overview of just coming from a place of me.
Absolutely. Excuse me. But when you were talking, it kind of made me think of actually what we're doing at that time of speaking our truth, is that not only are we willing to be courageous enough to be vulnerable, but also we're modelling a way of being, because in the workplace, for example, there's a lot of hiding behind a persona, a professional persona, that kind of stuff, where we daren't be seen, because ultimately, what's the worst that could happen? You could lose your job, and we might not want to do that. So there's a degree of, how long can I stay in this position before actually it no longer serves me to hide behind this way of being, which isn't authentic or true to myself. And so there's something there about, I don't know where I've lost my track now.
Well, you reminded me of something I actually posted. Sorry, go on. Did you remember?
I remember it was.
Yeah, go on.
Something, and I might have already said it. Anyway, Friday night. But there's something about modelling for other people. That was it.
Yeah.
That actually, it's okay. It's okay to be real. It's okay if I start crying. It's, whatever it is okay. Because why are we having to create this kind of this fort of apparent strength, and inverted commas, so that we appear to be something that we're not, and we're all playing the same game. And it takes somebody quite brave to say, actually, you know what, I'm going to have this difficult conversation because I'm worth it. You know, and if that can be, if that can be heard and accepted by the organisation, the organism, then you know, the system, it can be quite powerful, a powerful game changer for the ethos of a company, I guess.
Yeah, it can. And it can also shift relationships big
Yeah,
time, even within workspace.
yeah.
I remember a really difficult conversation I had with one of my managers going back 4 or 5 years now. And I was so upset. I was so angry.
Mm,
And we had to cut the conversation short because this was all sprung on me in the moment.
mm,
And I was trying to figure out what the heck was going on.
yeah,
And we had to pick it up the next day. The next day it didn't happen. So I emailed my manager and said, I'm very aware that we haven't finished this conversation. Can we schedule a time?
yeah,
And circle back round to it. And so we did. And I don't think I've ever seen her look more uncomfortable in my life. And it was it was difficult for both of us. Because I think on a deep level, she knew that I was coming from a place of deep, deep truth.
mm,
And what had occurred was not right
yeah.
in many, many ways. And it shifted our relationship. We had really quite a close working relationship up
Yes,
until that point, which was no more. Not in a bad way, not in a negative way. It was simply that trust had been broken big
right.
time. So I'd set a really clear and healthy, compassionate boundary that I, did not agree with what was going on. And that if you like, if that's a fortress, that was my fortress of truth. This is a line that I'm not going to allow anybody to cross, and I'm not going to cross that line either.
Yeah.
Um,
Lovely.
so that was really hard.
Yes.
And that stuck with me for a very long time, and I think it was because I was so hurt by it as well.
Yeah, yeah,
But it is about how we can bring ourselves into different situations without compromising our integrity, without compromising our truth. Um, and we bring different parts of ourselves to different parts of our lives.
absolutely.
We're not always responding to people in the same way as we would at home, as we do at work.
Yes,
But as long as we still come from that same place, and we can have the conversations that are important to us in the way that is impactful and effective and has a good outcome,
mm,
for not just yourself but for everyone. It is about not just holding ourselves but holding those other people in the conversation at the same time.
absolutely. So there's something about, for me, a call to action when we have to speak our truth, a call to action to be assertive, to meet the
Yeah,
challenge of that. So these are kind of golden opportunities, and sometimes the price is that the relationship shifts for worse
yeah,
or for better.
yeah,
But I like that idea of holding, more than just ourselves in that, because sometimes the truth that we speak is for the benefit of
mm,
more than just the two
yeah.
people involved. Yeah.
And it takes practice. This is not
Yes, that's
something
such a good
that,
point,
huh?
Karina. That's such a good point.
Yeah.
Because when I was studying for counselling, to become a counsellor, we learnt about congruent, a term coined by Carl Rogers, person-centred counsellor. And he coined the expression congruence in terms of the conditions needed for therapeutic growth
Mm-hmm.
in the therapy room. And so congruence, yes, being about your truth, matching on what you say, matching your inner truth, and being
Mm.
and having self-awareness around that to inform that. And so yes, that's something about when I was learning about all of that, opportunities seem to come my way at work as well, in particular, to be more congruent.
Mm.
You know, so to come away from that image of how other people, you know, should how I wanted to be seen by others,
Mm.
but
Mm.
actually who was I really, and could I bring aspects of that into the workplace without compromising myself or the system in some way.
Mm.
And I remember when you said the word practice, it really is. It's kind of coming more into yourself, into your own truth, and it
Mm.
takes time. It takes courage, and it takes time and
Yeah.
practice. It
Yeah.
really is key. Yeah.
I think effort matters because
Yes.
it's so easy just to knee jerk and react and not respond. It's it's about deliberate action taking with that effort. I think
Yes.
it's being aware of the growth that is still available to us in those areas.
Yes.
And by golly, you know, I've come a long way from 15 years ago, but I've still, I should say, and I've still still got a great big wonderful long stretch of road ahead of me with all these goodies to take on board and learn and practice, because
Yeah.
I'm by no means where I would love to be
Yeah.
when it comes to communication. There are still times where I bite my tongue,
Yes.
hold back, or I'm assessing a situation because I'm a little bit unsure of what's going on.
Can I cut in there?
Yeah.
Because I think sometimes I think it's okay that assessing is
Mm.
okay. It's almost, to me, it sounds like a survival strategy
Yeah.
to be able to hold back, actually.
Agree, absolutely. And I've become very, very good at that. And I didn't used to be. I
Right.
was very brash, you know, and just, you know, wasn't the sprinter in the sprinting block ready to take action with anything that needed
Right.
resolving, you know.
Yeah.
And I've become a lot more observant, a lot more
Right.
assessing,
Yes.
a lot more patient in my evaluation, and a lot more discerning in terms of which
Right.
grounds I choose to walk into to have these conversations with,
Brilliant.
uh, because they are energy draining, you know, even
Yes.
at the best of times.
Yes.
So, and I like to preserve my energy for the things that I feel matter.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
On that note, can
Yes.
we leave it there for tonight?
Yes, a nice short one, but a quick one, and
Yeah.
impactful and effective. And I hope that's helped anybody who watches it.
Yay. Absolutely. Lovely to talk with you as usual.
You too, Sue. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye for now.
Bye bye.